Tell me this breaking news.
Breaking news: Canucks have signed Kevin Lankinen.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
That's pretty big. What did they sign him for?
I believe it's 875,000. So
Ooh, bargain.
leaves them still about 100,000 in caps or 150 in cap space.
That's so much cap space.
Well, they can accrue it, right?
Mhm.
So this is the
Okay.
point, is that they wanna keep it available, like, they wanna add it up over the course of the season, because the more, they last year they couldn't add anybody at the trade deadline, or they
Mhm.
didn't they wanted to add, like, Chris Tanev. They couldn't add anybody else because they were capped out, and they would have needed other teams to do other stuff, like retain salary or whatever, and, they couldn't do that. So
Nice.
so so, yeah, so they wanna keep themselves in that position. Yeah, but yeah, talk away while I type away here.
Okay. Is it gonna be loud in the it's
No,
gonna
no, no.
sound like a newsroom. It's gonna be
No.
sweet. Okay, so what I figured we'd do is just totally ape off Elliot Friedman and his whole 32 thoughts thing, but I have 32 questions for
Oh,
you.
Jesus. Alright, I'll be short and sweet in my answers.
Okay, good, because so we can power through this before my daughter wakes up from her nap.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
each team, I have one quick question for you. And since we're both you're a Vancouver fan, obviously.
Yeah.
And yeah, because you are the team writer for do you want to say it or I guess
Well,
let
I'm the
people
beat
Google it?
writer, I'm the sort of a hockey Canucks beat writer for the province and the Vancouver Sun.
Yeah. So if you weren't that, would you still be a Vancouver Canucks fan?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way, I don't think of myself as a fan anymore.
Mm,
Um,
nice and
I'm not
objective.
cheering, like, you want it's here's how we put it. I don't win or lose, obviously winning's more interesting, but that's
Hmm.
not my job. My job is to talk about what happens with the team, why it's working, why it isn't working, what they could do better, what could be worse.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
so you don't yeah, you certainly are trying to be somewhat impartial. Obviously, you build relationships with the players. You want to see the players do well individually.
Hmm.
I mean, that's my job. My job is to watch athletes, and it, it's more interesting to watch them succeed. But learning about the challenges they're facing is also interesting. And so my job is to sort of provide to make the fans' experience more interesting, more insightful. Um, and to bring things, I mean, the hardest thing, we all know this, right? The hardest thing are often to hear the things that you don't want to hear, but they're often the most useful things.
Hmm.
And so, whereas a fan might be, "Oh, I don't want to hear, I don't hear," but like that's not my job. My job is to go in there
Right.
and explain what I think is going on, right or wrong. And there are a lot of people around whose job it is to pump up what the team is doing and turn a blind eye to everything else.
Yeah.
That's not my job.
Okay, nice. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I was just as a note,
Oh, so
I changed my background mid while you were talking, just in case anybody was wondering. The other background was from the Dale Show. This one's from
yeah.
Outrage Factory. Little stuff I should have handled, and little how the sausage is made. How the
Yeah.
sausage is packed. Is that how you say
Yeah.
it?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Are you ready for my first question?
Yeah, go for it.
So I figured we'd start in the West, even though everybody starts with their teams in the East. I'm going to start in the West because we both like the West. That's why I was talking about. I'm a fan of the Oilers. Full disclosure, I'm not like Pat. I don't try to keep
Yeah.
it objective. They're terrible. The way they manage the team could be deemed as terrible,
Oh.
but I love every second of it. I'm a huge offense guy. Whatever defense, just give me more shots. Okay, so we're going to start with Chicago. I'm just going to work through the list. It's the easiest way so
Yeah,
I
go
don't get
for it.
mixed up. Should the Blackhawks offer sheet Swayman? And the reason I say this is because Brossois, is it Brossois?
Yep.
He's injured, and they have a 1A, 1B with Brossois and Mrazek, which is terrible on its own. Like
Yep.
two ancient, like Mrazek's old enough to have a PTO with Edmonton right
They're
now.
both they're both goalies that, like, have had they continue to be NHL goalies,
Hmm.
and that's something that's not easy, but, they're sort of on the edge of the list. Let's put it
They're,
that way.
I would say they're both definitely competent backups.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Chicago has 6.67 million in cap space right now. And to offer sheet Swayman, they would have to pay a first round, a second round, and a third round if they were going to pay him in between 6 and change and 9 and change.
Right.
and I would
So
offer him
to
a
go
9
to
by
go
8.
go back to your premise, yeah, like I actually love your idea because like
Mhm,
here's a team that needs to, they need to be aggressive. Like Connor Bedard's only going to get better for the next couple of years, obviously,
mhm.
right? They
Yeah,
need to get aggressive. Um, and I just think I think that's a no brainer idea. The challenge, of course, is structuring it in such a way that makes it hard for Boston to match.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I love the concept.
yeah. I mean, just offering him 9 million for 8 years, I don't think Boston would match that because I think they already the word is they shied away from 8 by 8.
I haven't actually been keeping close. I
Okay.
honestly haven't been. It's not a situation I have to monitor that closely.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
um,
I'm
but
glad you like my idea. I thought you were gonna poo-poo it, but
no, I think I'm all for aggressive moves
mhm.
by NHL teams. I loved Doug Armstrong going after
Yeah.
Brober. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Brober the player. I'm a big fan of Holloway, but I'm a big fan of the concept. That's what I should say.
Yeah. And my other point is when you have a player like Bedard, you need to set up your team so that in like 5 years, Bedard's gonna wanna resign. And if you don't have a goalie that's a non-starter, like why would Bedard wanna stay in Chicago? So you go out and you get a Swayman for 8 years, then Bedard can see that and he's like, "Oh, I've no reason to leave." Uh,
Right.
my second question, moving to Colorado, is Landeskog going to ever play again? He's missed 2 full seasons now. He's not
I
slated
think
to
he'll have a
start.
go.
Mhm.
I think he'll have a go. Certainly, the intention continues to be that he'll play.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's a tough one. Like you want to believe the guy can come back.
Mhm.
He's been such a great player for this team, and one of the true all-time leaders, I would say.
Yeah.
He's on that pantheon of great, not just captains, but great leaders.
Nice.
Um, I- I'm not. Yeah, I still think like it's everything I've heard is that he's gonna play, or he's
Yeah.
gonna try anyway.
I mean,
Um,
yeah.
but 2 years
Obviously,
is a
he
long
wants to.
time. Like Dale,
Yeah.
you're not wrong, man. 2 years is a
Mhm.
long time.
Okay. Moving
Um,
on.
yeah.
Dallas. Should every team have a version of Victory Plus like Dallas has? Have you heard about their plan? So NHL teams, basically the NHL sells the national rights for broadcasting, then
Yes.
each team has the option to sell their regional rights, and
Yes.
that's why you get blackouts and stuff. And
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
Dallas is there's a new streaming service called Victory Plus, and the only
Right.
thing on it right now is Red Bull, Dude Perfect. I don't know Anaheim's involvement in it, but they're on there because I downloaded the app to see what it is. But Dallas is also on there, and they're going to stream all of their regional games for free, and anybody can sign up and watch that. I don't know if that's going to affect us because we're in Canada or whatever, but to me, this is a no brainer. Every team should have this option.
Right. Yeah. Um. I it's. I mean, I'm more of the notion that part of the reason why we still have regional rights is because it's still valuable to some teams.
Hmm.
Um. And um. That said, the way regional rights are still carved out makes no sense in the modern era where everything's available.
Hmm.
Um, I guess, I sit back and I think a bit about, what are we used to, right? I think it comes back to what we're used to, right? And we've been so conditioned to sort of everything being instant, everything be available. But you know what? Spotify has done terrible things for the music industry, right? Like it's made it easier for the user, but for the sort of sake of the industry, it was better to have CDs, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, is that better? It's certainly easier. I don't know if it's better. I think it's harder for people to sustain careers in music. So, I guess I look back and I say, okay, if we had instant access to games, how do you there's a value in the Vancouver Canucks having a regional rights package,
Hmm.
right? Um, why they make it difficult to distribute inside the region. I guess that's really what I focus on is why do they make it so hard? So sure, I mean, however you distribute your regional games, um, there's surely technological ways around it. So to
Mhm,
me, that's really what it is. How do we get access to this kind of stuff, and how do we move forward? And if you don't want to subscribe to Sportsnet now, or sorry, you don't want to. I mean, like in Canada, they kind of solved it with the streaming thing in that you subscribe to Sportsnet now, and you get whatever rights are in your region, unless it's TSN. Which, like, that's the thing. I guess I don't. That is the challenge still, because you have
mhm,
Sportsnet being the national rights holder as well as a regional rights holder, but not everywhere. So like um, Jets games or Habs games or Senators games are on regional TSN feeds.
mhm.
So until you figure that out, I mean, I suppose you find a way to add that on and you direct the money to the rights holder. I don't. But I mean, Sportsnet doesn't want to do that necessarily. Anyway, that's where I still land on all those things. Like, there's got to be a technological way to find our way through all this.
Okay, good answer. Very informative.
Yeah.
Moving on to Minnesota. Do we care about anything other than Fleury's farewell tour this season out of Minnesota?
Ah, I mean, certainly it's the most notable story out of there. I
Mhm,
think to me, I'm interested to see Bill Guerin kind of made a mess of things last year. The team was the team underperformed.
mhm.
Um, I guess I'm more curious to see, can they actually move forward? Like, they had to make some real gambles. They looked like the right path. Uh, Was last year a pattern of where they're going, or was last year just a bad luck?
Yeah. Okay. Nashville. Mustard Stamkos. Did you see those photos of him in the full mustard getup? It was just I don't know if it was wrong because the mustard looked bad or it was Stamkos and not blue and white. How is this gonna play out? What do you think?
Um, I think it's an interesting move. I think what it is that, yeah, you're just not used to how it looks.
Mhm,
So, I listen. The cap forces you to make difficult choices,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And Tampa had to make a choice. They weren't gonna be able to go forever. And like Stamkos is at the end of his career, right?
Mhm.
Like they've made a bold choice to move on in a way that Pittsburgh didn't. Like
Yeah.
there's still a lot of value. Like, if I've been the Penguins, I mean, I know the Penguins wouldn't have wanted to, but I have to believe they thought long and hard about what to do with Crosby and what to do with Malkin and what to do with Letang. Because
Yeah.
all three of those guys obviously are yeah, expensive items to move on, but like
Mhm.
they still have a lot of value.
Mhm.
And Tampa wasn't able to move on from trade away from Stamkos, but they made the choice to use the money in something else. So I think it was an interesting bet by Nashville. I think it's going to be hard to make it work, but just because in the end he's in his late 30s, and
Yeah.
there's whatever. But like, Nashville was a pretty fun team last year. They were
Mhm.
got a long way under Andrew Brunette, and Stamkos is an interesting choice for them. And he's certainly a guy who's kept himself fit and still can score. He's not the dominant player he used to be, but he's still a very useful player. So listen, I think Nashville could be a very interesting team this year, and he's a big reason why.
Nice. Okay. St. Louis. A little sensitive about this because I'm a self-admitted Oilers fan, but are the St. Louis Blues the slimiest team in the league? First, they did the offer sheet on Holloway and Broberg, which is bad enough. We've
Yeah.
seen offer sheets, we love them, but two players from the same team, that's unheard of. Plus, now they have that what was his name? The RFA that they didn't sign, but they somehow got him to training camp on a loophole because they made him sign a PTO.
Yeah.
Like that's to me, I don't know, like there's the NHL is a business, and then there's hey, we're not giving you a deal, but you still have to come to fucking training camp and work your bag off.
Well, I mean, there's a reason why PTOs exist, right?
Mhm.
There's a particular type of player that it tends to apply to. It's a guy that um, certainly believes they can still be useful. The team has to think of them enough to have a look, Most of the time, these are about players who, I mean, in preseason, it's less and less the case, but in preseason, um, teams need veterans to qualify for their early preseason rosters. I mean, this has
Mhm.
happened before with, it used to happen more often than it does now, but there's a minimum number you need to put in the lineup on any given night in preseason. And
Okay.
so, that's part of the story here always.
So,
Um,
like, PTOs are sometimes just a rental for
yeah,
preseason?
right.
Mhm.
Or you're doing a guy a favor or what have you.
Mhm.
Um, or sometimes it's to fill out the numbers. Like the Canucks had a PTO, Dylan Ferguson, this week because they thought they needed another goalie. But by Saturday, he was already been bumped down to the minor league unit. And then, of course, the Canucks went and signed Kevin Lankinen, as I broke on air. Um,
Mhm.
but that was a guy they needed, another NHL or guy who's at least has pro experience, and he had a lot more experience than what was there. Um, Even if it was only 3 NHL games, he still played as a pro. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, it's in the end, it's often for older players who are still holding on to the dream, and teams are happy to have them in the mix, and every once in a while, a guy wins a contract and ends up playing in the NHL for the rest of
Yeah.
the season. Yeah, I don't have much of an issue with it.
And the weird thing about this, the player is that Nikita Alexandrov. I just looked it up. Sorry. He's 24 years old. So if he makes the team, do they give him an RFA deal or a PTO deal? Like, how would that work? Like, do they give him the RFA he wanted, or do they make him, if he fails the PTO, do they just wait and it goes to arbitration?
Sorry, ask that again.
Okay, so Nikita Alexandrov, that's a player.
Yes.
He's an RFA. They didn't
Yeah.
sign him. They sent him an offer. He refused it. So now they said, "Hey, do a PTO
Right.
so you can either come, try get on the team, and then we'll give you a contract, but if we don't like what we see, we'll make you sit out and wait, I guess, till arbitration or whatever." But my question is, if he signs, it's more
Right.
like
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
on
No.
paper,
There's
like,
no arbitration's already happened. Like
"Oh, did it?"
arbitration happens in the summer. But no, you're right. The
Oh,
Alexandrov thing
yeah.
is interesting
Yeah.
because um, he just doesn't have a contract. And I think what it is really it's that this is a guy that struggled with injuries last year.
Mhm.
Didn't get to play a ton. And they're basically saying I it is an unusual one. You're not wrong, right?
Yeah.
It's a very unusual decision.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's also partly because um, there's always reasons underneath all this on how they're trying to structure their roster and
Mhm.
and things like that. So um, you're right. It's an interesting one, and it's a bit of a bet from the player. Um, there might be something going on behind this.
Yeah.
I'm just curious to see who his agent is because sometimes you can parse things based on what the agent is doing.
Ooh, look
Uh,
at this guy journalizing,
Pat Morris.
doing some
So
research.
Pat, so Alexandrov's got Pat Morris, who's one of the bigger agents out there.
Mhm.
So the fact that he's sitting there without a contract but still playing, it tells you there's something going on in the background. So
Okay.
there's potential. I mean, I don't. I'm just guessing. I'm just reading the tea leaves here.
Yeah.
There's some kind of story in the background here.
So I guess TBD, to be
Yeah, something to
determined.
watch.
Okay, moving on to Utah. So when Utah got our, well, I can't remember the guy's name. When the guy got the team and they moved out of Arizona, they left the franchise rights with Arizona Coyotes with the old owner, and he
Yeah.
had 5 years to get in. But since they moved and since they announced that they're going to go under Utah Hockey Club for this season and then pick a name next year, the old owner waived his, I guess he waived his rights to the Coyotes franchise.
Yes.
So can Utah still be the Utah Coyotes? Can
Well, they're
can they
not
still
going to
be the
be.
Utah Yotes?
Um, you know what? I don't remember exactly how it all shakes out, but basically, in terms of all that, I believe all the imagery stays there.
Mhm.
Um, Essentially, Utah is a new team, is the
Okay.
way to understand it.
Yeah.
Um, the Coyotes franchise still exists,
Mhm.
but it's inactive, I think is what they called it.
Yeah.
Alex Morello, who was the owner who had no money,
Mhm.
um, basically what happened last spring was the NHL figured out a way to kind of force his hand and force him end up to get to a spot he didn't want to end up. And he's now, I mean, he basically no one expects he's going to be able to deliver on this on the sort of premise that there's certain well, how to put it? There's certain requirements he has to deliver on if he wants to get a team. Basically, if he gets an arena built, and
Mhm.
there are a
Oh,
lot of obstacles.
he's already like, "I'm done. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not even gonna
Yeah,
try."
basically he said that. But just for argument's sake,
Okay.
it was put forward. It said, "Listen, if you can get an arena done and that's up to standard, and
Mhm.
essentially within the next 5 years, we will be obligated to offer you a new team."
Yeah.
And that's how they basically got him to accept this $1 billion bribe. He got $1 billion.
I would take that
Um,
bribe any day.
you know,
Could you imagine if
um,
somebody gave me $1 billion to quit doing this podcast?
right? So basically, here's your money. Go away. If here's how you can come back,
Mhm.
and nobody believed he would come back. And then, of course, he bailed on. There was a land auction. He bailed on that. No one thinks he's ever going to come back.
Mhm.
So in 5 years' time, or maybe sooner if he gives it up, in 5 years' time, um, the NHL will be back in Phoenix. You want to know the
Nice.
list? I checked with a few people. Who else might get a team in the NHL?
Who?
Houston, which everyone talks about. Atlanta, which has been talked about.
Yeah.
Kansas
Quebec?
City. Nope.
Quebec?
Forget it. No.
Is Montreal gonna block Quebec?
Be serious. No, nobody. There's no money in Quebec.
Oh, okay.
There's just no corporate money. It's like playing. It's like it would be like going back to Hartford.
That's true.
It just doesn't make sense. And I cannot believe this one, Portland, but someone told me Kansas City because there's a building, strong community there, a lot of good amount of corporate money.
Mhm.
And Portland, which I don't believe, but I guess if they say,
Yeah, that
well,
seems because
there's a part.
Seattle Washington as a state seems like the money for sports franchises is gonna be sucked up by Seattle because they're supposed to be getting an NBA team back. So I don't see how they could have a new hockey team, a new NBA team, and then
Well, Portland's
another
not
new
that big
hockey team.
either. Like that's the thing.
Wait, that's in Oregon too, never mind, but
Yeah,
it's,
it's not
like,
that
right
big.
next door.
It's just not that big.
Yeah.
But Portland apparently is on the list. So anyway,
Okay,
I told
moving on
you. Yeah.
to Winnipeg. So, the NHL had their Vegas NHL media tour, and they sent a representative from each team, and Winnipeg sent Cole Perfetti, who is an unsigned RFA.
Right.
That's weird. Like, he's technically not even on the team, and they're like, "You're the guy who's the face of the franchise for this tour."
Right.
I guess
Yeah.
maybe Hellebuck was busy?
Uh, yeah. I guess it's one of those ones where the NHL, I mean, because the NHL, NHLPA, right? Like it's
Mhm.
not just the NHL. So the sort of it's good for his brand to be there.
Oh, yeah, definitely,
Um,
like, I could see how he'd be like, "If I do this, it'll help me get a contract."
well, and help raise my profile, and in a way
Yeah,
he can talk to other people, right? Like it's a chance for him
yeah.
to kind of wander around. If you're the Jets, you're kind of going, oh boy, right?
Mhm.
Um, it's a weird one for sure, absolutely for sure. It's a weird one, but he's he'll get what he's going to get. I mean,
Mhm.
it's funny. I find it funny that we're seeing so many of these situations where there are guys on sign still. Like
Mhm.
we used to have this more often, right? Like it felt like it used to be a much more common occurrence where players would not show up to training camp because they didn't have their contract, that stuff like
Yeah.
that. Um, it's funny that I suppose it's funny that we don't hear of it more as a major talking point. Like you highlighted the right thing, which is kind of weird that he's he's in he's the public face,
Yeah.
despite not having a contract. That is definitely weird, but
Mhm.
um I more than anything think it's weird that I think it's odd that we don't hear these situations more often, I guess. But
That's
maybe
a good
that's just
point.
because we're in the world we're in where the cap's as tight as it is and there's so little
Mhm.
wiggle room and teams are kind of locked into what they have. But and I say this on the day that Kevin Lankinen ends up just settling for a contract that I think he wanted more money. He's a guy that was
What did he get? You said 875?
875. So yeah, I mean the equation was interesting in that he had two different things. Um, there were two different things to consider, which was
Yeah.
one, he would have been looking around on the market saying, okay, what other teams might be interested in me, um, and can they afford more the Canucks can offer? And then the Canucks would have been looking around as well, saying, okay, well, what other goalies are out there? A goalie that I think everyone's the same way to see what happens is John Gibson. Everyone thinks he's going to be traded by Anaheim. So, for instance, in Anaheim, you're talking about say he had been traded away, and maybe they want to sign Lankinen. If you're Lankinen, what's more appealing, being the backup in Vancouver, where the team's quite good, or being
Mhm.
the starter on a not very good team in Anaheim, right? Like, what's better for
That's
your
true.
career? On and on. Anyway, he's now settled and said, "Well, no, I'll take the opportunity that's in front of me," as opposed to a bunch of what ifs that were still sitting out there. So, um, yeah, here. We are.
Okay. Moving on to the Pacific, division, we're gonna start with Anaheim. So Gudas was named the captain. Do you think this was partially Anaheim? There's 2 options. One, Anaheim is just totally embracing they were the most penalized team in the NHL last year with 1,108 minutes. Are they just gonna be like the new bad boys? Or did they make Gudas the captain because he's the only guy that nobody would make fun of when he looks like a giant traffic pylon in their new orange jerseys?
I mean, so much of what's gone on in Anaheim was going back to not being able to find their way to the next phase of things,
Mhm.
right? Like, you think about the strong teams they had 10 years ago. And they found some really strong players in there, but
Mhm.
they are a great example of, just because you say you have a plan, you have a rebuild plan, so on, and you've got a bunch of prospects, doesn't mean it's going to work out flawlessly. So, like, Trevor Zegras, who's been an exciting player, but they certainly have doubts about him being the guy. Is he
Yeah,
the
like,
guy that's going to make this all work?
he was on the cover of EA Sports 3 years ago, 3 games ago,
Yeah,
and then he just kinda disappeared. I guess he
yeah,
was injured last year too, so
yeah, exactly. Well,
yeah,
that's exactly it. Like, here's a guy that he's kind of stalled out a little bit,
that's
I
true.
suppose.
Yeah.
So, there you are. That like, here's a team that's got obviously a new GM come in with a plan, and he's going to try
Mhm.
to go young and push as hard as they can on that. Um, but you can't, like the thing to remember is that if rebuilds, you can strip it down, blow it all up, and go be aggressive in chasing after top end draft picks, right? Like that.
Yeah,
There is a feasible way to do that, but you can't do that forever,
that's
and you
true.
have to be aggressive in how you build your roster.
Mhm. Oh,
And you need a little bit of luck.
mhm. You're, freezing up there, buddy.
About their plan, a decade ago. Like, at the end of the day, they will tell you that that sped everything up. They were
Yeah.
not their plan did not include getting a generational talent, right?
Okay, yeah.
They were still chasing after great players. They hoped they were
Mhm.
gonna be near the top of the draft. They had that season where they were actively trying to be as bad as it could be,
Mhm.
but they weren't doing it with the plan being it was Matthews or bust, you know?
Yeah.
You still have to hit on a lot of other stuff.
Okay.
And I mean, look at the Oilers. Look how long it took the Oilers to sort it out.
We'll see.
Well, but I
Mo
mean, my point is, sorry, in the
Yeah.
sense of, like, they've had a good couple of years, and almost close to great year last year, right? Like,
Mhm.
they finally have some strong seasons, but look how long it took. Like, McDavid is, we Draisaitl just signed his contract, but, like, McDavid's gonna need another new contract, right? Like
Yeah.
he's not seen a lot of winning. Before this year, They did all this work and they made the conference finals once,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
Yeah.
So
Uh, let's move on to Calgary. Will we see a complete fire sale? Pun intended.
I think so. I think so. And like there's a team, they didn't have a lot coming in. They made this couple shrewd trades. Obviously, that trade with the Canucks is going to help them. Hunter Buskevich, is a very interesting defenseman. The Canucks
Mhm.
knew they were giving up a lot and giving him up, but also you got to give up something. They know that Kuzmenko is a fun player, but he's not going to be the guy. If you're Calgary, what were you looking for in that trade, right? You were
Yeah.
looking. Lindholm wasn't going to stick around. You needed to think about the future. You need to find a piece that you think is going to help you down the road. Kuzmenko's fun in the short term,
Mhm.
but it's not. They weren't trading for Kuzmenko. They were trading for a prospect that they think's interesting. So yeah, that is more than anything the direction that Calgary's taken. They have guys they can still probably, a few guys they can still move. Like I think Kuzmenko could be an interesting trade chip for them going down the stretch. We'll see how his season goes. But is he a guy that maybe a team throws a dart at late in the season
Yeah.
because they're looking for a little extra punch? A guy that you can play on your power play, um, who's basic. Is a pretty good dude. May not be most attentive to detail guy, but if your team's strong enough, that's a guy you can work around.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think there's a team that has a clear sense of what it's trying to do, and that is what I'm saying is that you need to accumulate a bunch of young guys and bring them in together, and then you do have to have guys who can fill out the rest of your lineup. But it's not easy, and they've got to be aggressive in doing that.
'Kay. Moving on to Edmonton. So the league's going younger, and the Oilers, for whatever reason, are going the opposite way. They lost 2 prospects, and instead of trying to go out and find a young defenseman or a young forward, they give a PTO to Mike Hoffman. Is obviously this is like before when I was saying about, but when you have a player like Bedard, you got to like sign a really good goalie just to keep him. With Edmonton, it feels like they want to win the Stanley Cup, not because they just won a Stanley Cup, which is obviously, but it feels like if they don't win soon, Connor McDavid's gone. But I also feel like a big portion of Draisaitl's contract, the 14 million, so he's the highest paid player in the league, but a large portion of that was kind of to incentive to keep Connor there. Like if Connor was gone, Draisaitl probably doesn't make 14. You know what I'm saying?
Um, I think. I mean, to me, that the Draisaitl is signed a. Draisaitl would be a super. He is a superstar,
Yeah.
right?
He's won the
Um,
heart, so
and would be able to carry a team on his own. There's the
yeah.
1-2 punch of the two of them, and like I
Mhm.
said, they finally put that team together, held that team together, or assembled that team, I should say,
Yeah.
and made it work. Um, if he had gone on, I don't know. I don't know. I think it's so tough to read. It's so tough to read. I mean, most guys do play to win trophies. Not every
Mhm.
player plays to win trophies. They clearly, if playing for trophies is what they're interested in, they're still in a great spot. Like there's a bit of the known. They know what's in front of them. The and the thing I suppose that surprised me a little bit was um, the fact Draisaitl could have taken a shorter deal and gone to free agency and
Yeah.
probably still gotten a huge contract like that. Not every guy's gonna be able to do that.
Mhm.
That said, I mean, remember when I talked to Elias Pettersson's agent, Pat Brisson, last spring after Pettersson signed. And I said, well, why, you could have done a shorter deal here and then signed maybe a longer deal in a few years' time. And he said, well, you still have to think about like the difference between what you're giving up now in a short-term deal, because a short-term deal is not going to get you as much money as a long-term deal. And then how hard is it to make up the money if you're going to sign that contract when you're 30 or whatever?
Mhm.
Um, because then you're talking about years, you know, you take the two deals together, it becomes like a 10-year deal, but can you make up the extra money and all that? And if I'm Drysdale, I would have probably said, yeah. That's
Mm,
what surprised me in all that. It's
okay.
less this. It's less the dynamic of who's on the roster. It's more just your. More and more I've come to realize that it's about players recognizing their own earning power
Mhm.
and having to weigh that um, potential. I mean, Sidney Crosby. One estimate is Sidney Crosby left $50 million on the table by constantly signing for $8.7 million in Pittsburgh. He
Yeah.
could have made the guy could have made way more money in his life if he wanted. He
Yeah,
could have made it in Pittsburgh, but he didn't.
that I think is more like his superstition,
Sure.
like how he won't go on the cover of the EA Sports NHL because of the the cover curse, like as we've seen with Zegras. And although it didn't happen to Caulfield last year, but whatever, we'll see. Um, moving on to Los Angeles, how bad does Rob Blake's gamble on Pierre-Luc Dubois
Oh
ruin the team? Like, are they going into full rebuild because of this one missed
no,
call?
no. It they made a bad call. You're absolutely right. I mean,
Mhm.
they made a lot of things happen. He got into a huge cap issue because of it. Um, they were stuck in neutral. They made some weird bets. They were very much stuck in neutral.
Mhm.
Um, in terms of where their team was progressing, and now they're not. They've got cap space. Like that's the amazing thing.
Yeah, that's
Like
true.
the way that um, the way that he got out of jail, it's kind of wild. Like um, they're now looking at a much nicer looking cap, right? Like they've got um, the only real long term deals they're staring at. I mean, I guess Edmondson's signed till 2028, but I mean, I think that's an overvalued defenseman, but they're not paying him a
Mhm.
ton. Trevor Moore is on until 2028, but he's a good player. They've got young guys. Fiala signed through 29, Byfield signed through 29,
Mhm.
Mikey Anderson signed through 2031. But like, they've actually got some smart
Like Anderson's not gonna make it to 31.
2031. Mikey Anderson, they've
Yeah,
got him
no,
signed.
I know, like, he's not gonna make 7 more years. Isn't he, like, 40?
No, Mikey Anderson,
Oh,
25.
I'm thinking of the goalie.
No, oh yeah, sorry, Quick,
No, Anderson.
Kemper.
No, I was thinking of the other goalie,
Craig Anderson?
Anderson.
No, no,
Yeah,
God, no. No. Mikey
okay.
Anderson's a handy little defenseman. Like, you look at their cap now, and you now that they've gotten rid of Dubois, like, they're actually like, it's not looking so terrible.
Well, that's good.
Like, they're dealing with a bunch of kind of medium term contracts. Doughty's on 11 million for 2 more years or 3 more seasons.
Dang.
Kopitar is on 7 million for 2 more seasons. Like they're actually all of a sudden back in a spot where they should be. They've got some options in front of them. They need some of these young guys to hit. They need
Yeah.
the likes of Kaliev and Turcotte to play out. Um,
So, you could almost say, like, as bad of a move as it was to gamble on Pierre-Luc Dubois, it
yeah,
kinda seems like they escaped, not unscathed, but better than it seemed like they were going to at the end of last year. Because I remember everybody was talking about buying out Pierre-Luc Dubois' contract and all that stuff. But now that they've unloaded him,
right.
like, they didn't even retain salary, did they?
No,
Oh,
like
crazy.
it's a remarkable deal. Like that's why I went to go double check that I
Mhm.
hadn't forgotten anything, but like they unloaded the whole thing. Like it's kind of wild.
Alright.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to San Jose. With Smith, Celebrini, and now Askarov signing to the Sharks, are
Yeah.
they gonna be good next year? Like,
No, not
not
yet.
good, not
They're
good.
they're on the right track, but there's still a lot on that. Still a lot of junk on that team.
They're
Like
not
they
gonna be
just
32nd in the league for sure.
no. Here's your biggest sign. They still have $10 million in cap space to work with, right?
Ooh,
Like they've got
that's a
Couture, huge
nice
questions there. So Foley was a
yeah.
nice short-term signing, but still, like I thought that
Mhm.
he would have been a good fit on the Canucks, but he got a lot more money from San Jose. He was going to get here. But like, look at the top end of their forward group, right? Like, it's just
Yeah.
it's all they've got the young guys, right? They got Will Smith, Leckland, Celebrini. Like they've got some neat younger players there for sure. But your top, Couture is old. Toffoli's a fun player, but like really, he's not a first line player anymore. Granlund, Wenberg, like Barclay Goodrow. They've got guys that are, um, they've got some useful utility, but they're not. There's not enough star power there right now. And then on the blue line, like Vlasic is old,
Hmm.
and Cody Ceci, Jake Wellman, like it's a bunch of guys that would be depth defensemen on pretty much any other team. So um they traded for Askarov, which, as you mentioned, is like that's a smart long view move.
Yeah, it's weird
Um
because Askarov, they already have Vanacek, Blackwood, and Dell.
yeah.
Does Askarov start in the NHL this year, or do you think
Oh
he's
yeah.
going to? Oh,
It's gonna be
froze.
interesting whether they go for a three-man monster. I
Hmm.
think more and more you may see teams go for the three-man monster, but like this is an example of when I was mentioning the Lankinen thing before. Like you look at what other teams might do. Well, is a team would team be interested in scooping up Mackenzie Blackwood or like Vanacek if they somehow had to get dumped on waivers, right?
Yeah.
Like like San Jose does have to figure something out in goal.
Hmm.
Um, but they're not in a bad spot because they know who their guy's going to be, and that's Askarov, and they just and goalie is going to be, and it's going to be one of those guys, probably.
Okay. Moving on to Seattle.
Yeah.
Will Shane Wright finally live up to his draft day ego when he was mean mugging the
I
Montreal
love the framing.
Canadiens?
I love the framing.
Yeah.
It's certainly a big year for him for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. Um, it's a big year for him. There's absolutely no doubt.
Hmm.
And um, the Kraken were very creative in how they built his development path.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's an interesting year for him for sure. Big opportunity there. I mean, it's a team that needs to take that's had a decent start. He's got a coach he knows because he's spent some time playing Coachella Valley for Bilesma.
Hmm.
Um, it's a team that needs to start taking some steps forward though, for sure. Like the player.
Okay. Vancouver. We already talked about them signing Lankinen, which will actually help with whatever's going on with Demko, which is actually my question. Is it his hips? I've texted you probably throughout the
No,
years at least three
no, he
times being
basically
like,
made it clear. Like he made it
yeah,
pretty clear this week. He didn't say exactly what it is. I have a theory. I'm trying to punch my way through. I'm not going to say what it is, but
okay.
he made it clear that like it was that what we all saw. It was that moment when he nudged into the post. Um, I think our instincts was that it was a meniscus problem. It sounds like it's not. He described it as a muscle injury.
Yeah.
Um, and that it's a very rare one, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's
Um,
a
but yeah,
very
that essentially there's an issue that in that area. But like I mean, I'm not in Penticton to be clear. I'm frustrated. I'm not, but I'm not. And so I have to go off what everyone else says. But it was you watch the video. He gave a 12-minute chat with the media about his situation. Looked very
mhm,
upbeat, very positive. And I think some of that does have to do with the fact that he's had a couple good weeks of progress, and he's feeling like he doesn't know what his timeline is, but um, he's feeling good. I think, I think he's a guy that I think he's gonna be. I don't think he'll be ready necessarily for the start of the season. There's no reason to be that aggressive, but
yeah.
he's close. I think he'll be
Mhm.
back by the end of October.
Yeah,
And,
especially now with Lankinen and Shelovs, you don't need to rush him back because
no,
you could
no,
definitely get like at least till quarter way,
yeah.
20 games into the season and not have to be like worried about losing your playoff spot with those two guys.
Well, that I mean, yeah, you still need a good start for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but like they're looking at um they're looking at how they're going to make this all work now, right? Like,
Hmm.
what do you do with Shelovs? Like, is Shelovs just going to go straight down for it? Are you going to start your three goalies? I mean, the way you juggle through your um your roster to start the season. I mean, does this mean that Dakota Joshua starts the year on LTI? Like, on right now, the way their roster sets up, they have to find um, $1 million in cap space, right?
Mm,
Or sorry, 700,000 dollars in cap space.
okay.
So,
It's not too hard.
oh, it's not too hard. They're gonna have to probably put someone on waivers though.
Mm,
And I'm just sort of eyeballing what's going on here. Like, yeah, I think they're gonna either have to. I don't think they want to send out Phil DiGiuseppe, but maybe they're gonna have to.
mhm,
And Nils Oman. And what are we talking about here? Yeah, so maybe that means Joshua starts the year on LTI. Like, I'm not sure. Um, it's and if they want to start the year with Jonathan Lekkerimäki in the NHL, like, I don't, there's a lot of kind of roster questions now.
mhm.
Um, yeah. Anyway,
Okay, moving on to Vegas. Where's Leonard? Like,
oh man,
it's funny because the other day when I was making this list of my questions, I was like, they were talking about Thompson and people moving on from Vegas. I was like, "Oh, yeah, whatever happened to Leonard?" He had surgery in 2022 on his back, I think, and then he's been gone for 2 seasons, just like Landeskog, and then I Googled it, and then by happenstance, that day, there was a news story about how he didn't show up to training camp because even though he's on long-term injured relief or whatever, reserve, you still, as a player, you still have to go to training camp and get a doctor to look at you and be like, yeah, he can't play, so he's entitled to his money on the LTIR. But Leonard never showed up, and I haven't heard anything about where he is. Is he just like in the wind, or is he like having substance abuse problems again and he's in rehab somewhere?
I think the expectation, my certainly, I think the expectation was that he would certainly show up. I don't think Vegas was banking on him necessarily being there this season.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, he's now in the wind, and he missed his. I mean, the thing with Vegas that I think everyone, his the real story with him is it's a hip issue. I mean, he's had some mental health stuff, I think, well documented, but he's got a hip issue, and if he doesn't show up to fail it, um, in theory, Vegas could not pay him.
Yeah.
And obviously,
I'm just gonna Google his
given
contract.
Vegas's shenanigans with LTI, and I don't like how they framed it over the years.
Do you want a conspiracy I just thought of?
Actually, Friedman just posted a story about this.
Oh, did he?
Um, Robin Lehner made a brief statement saying, "All I can say at this time is everyone knows why I couldn't be there. I'm waiting for calmly for things to be sorted out." So, according to several sources, everyone involved knew Lehner would not be there. The some sources indicate the NHL, NHLPA, and Vegas are working on a solution. Vegas will not be reporting to the club this year, said GM Kelly McCrimmon on Thursday. Continues to be unfit to play. There are unique circumstances surrounding a situation that the league, the players, and the team are working through. We are assessing our next steps.
Do you wanna hear my conspiracy theory I just came up with?
Yeah, go for it.
What if Vegas was like, "Hey, you probably like it seems like he's never gonna play again with this hip issue.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years he's gone. He's gone for another year. He's got 5 this is the last year of his $5 million contract. Maybe Vegas goes, "We'll still give you the 5 million low key on the slide if you don't show up, and then we can get rid of your contract, and then we won't have to deal with that 500 mil messing up our LTIR, which is our playoff our playoff fund, basically." Like, is it just wild that it's another year and there's all like even before the season begins, there's LTIR shenanigans with Vegas, but this
Well,
way, a
that's
different
what I was
way?
getting at, was that if there was something nefarious here, and they had said, "Well, he didn't show up, so we're cutting him," and then they say they're all of a sudden under the cap. I don't
Hmm.
think teams would have accepted that given what's gone on before.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot of eyes on Vegas with everything that's happened. They haven't done anything that the rules prohibit. There is obviously an element of spirit of the rules, but
Hmm.
but um, and I don't want to say you can get any old doctor to sign any old thing, but obviously there are doctors who will sign any old thing.
Yeah.
And if you're following the rules and it's all documented and it's all above board, um, there's not a lot you can do. I mean, I think we've talked about this before, but there has been proposals out there like if you aren't eligible to play in the last game of the regular season, you
Yeah.
shouldn't be allowed to play in the playoffs,
That's true. I
or you
would like
shouldn't
some.
be playing game one of the play. Like I think there's
Mhm.
regulatory ways to sort of deal with that problem in a way that
Yeah.
doesn't um, get too out of hand. Because mostly I'm fine with what teams do. I think I I
Yeah.
I I think teams should be allowed to put the best um, lineup on the ice as possible.
Mhm.
Um,
Could there
do
even be
I
a
have an
s
issue
yeah.
with regular season games and playoff games being different? Well, I mean, players are played in the playoffs. Unless you find a way to resolve that issue, then
Yeah.
it's sort of the notional idea of the salary cap is kind of silly.
I
So,
feel like maybe like what you're saying about playing the last game of the season, maybe the NHL has to have some sort of like independent doctor check out these guys on LTIR, and if they like, I don't know, like a week or however set many games before the playoffs start, and just to see like, hey, is Mark Stone able to play now, or are they waiting a week just so they don't have to fudge with their cap and stuff? And then if that doctor who's works for the NHL instead of the team says yes, then they can like figure it out. Because it's like I get like the thing of get them to play the last game, but if you get a guy who's not quite ready and he plays like say the last game of the season instead of jumping in the second or third round of the playoffs and he aggravates something, then it's going to be a big dramatic to do. So you don't really want to do that either. So it's like I could see why this is a problematic thing from all angles.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's like I said, there are reasons why LTI exists.
Hmm.
Teams have used it to their advantage. To me, a bigger concern is teams having players who have retired but haven't officially, and they're still on the books, and then players retire like Roberto Luongo, and teams get punished for that. Like
Yeah.
the system is incongruous, and there are bigger issues than the fact that there's players who suddenly appear in the lineup at the playoffs.
Okay. So we only made it through the Western Conference so far. We've been
Well,
here.
why don't I come back next week and we'll do
Yeah,
the
let's
Eastern?
do the Eastern Conference next week. That sounds great because my daughter miraculously is still asleep and hasn't woke up yet. And you got this big bag of news to break.
Yeah, I got to finish up with my
Yeah.
little bit of writing here.
Thank you so much for coming by. I've wanted to do this for so long, just come up
Yeah,
with
I
all these
know.
dumb questions to ask you. I love it.
We'll make yeah, you know what? Next Saturday we around the same time we can make it work.
Oh, perfect. Sounds
Yeah.
good. I'll soften my girlfriend to the idea.
I just love talking hockey, baby.
Oh, me too. My favorite part is like you're like obviously I'm not a hockey guy. I admit fully I'm kind of a bad fan because I came by way mostly of my fanship of fantasy. Like that's why I'm a Drysdale fan and Oilers fan. Like I liked Oilers when I was a kid. And then I went to Vancouver, a fan, because I live in Vancouver. And then when the Sedins left, I was like, I'm not feeling it. And I was like, well, I liked the Oilers when I was a kid. Draisaitl is there. He's my favorite fantasy hockey player. So it's like it's kind of like I fully admit that I come by way of my hockey fandom through my fantasy team because it's like those are the players I pay more attention to than anyone else. So it's like this is all just a big way of saying it's nice to have you here to validate my hockey legitness.
I'm happy to be here, buddy.
Okay. So yeah, we'll stop there. We'll let you finish your story and thanks a lot for coming.
Take care, pal.
Bye.
over the top.